Oh god, the last guy I've got is Danish, and his name, I'm not going to pronounce his whole name, just one name. This one name I'm going to pronounce is Kierkegaard.
Okay, we gotta find him a nickname.
Now, well, his first name is Søren, so I think that could be easier.
Z, let's say Mr. Z.
It's an S, actually.
S, Mr. S.
It's fine, I can say Kierkegaard.
Yeah, but I can't.
You don't have to. Just say this Danish guy.
Okay, this Danish guy.
So he's like on the opposite spectrum from Nietzsche and Hume. He's quite...
Oh, thank God.
He's quite religious.
Oh.
Yes.
Never mind.
Well,
Literally, thank God.
He had a lot of philosophies, but I focused on this just as a contrast from the other two guys. And I'm also finding people's philosophies about religion interesting. So he also had some psychology and fiction involved in his works, which I'm not going to get into, but just as a background.
He reminds me of someone.
Yeah, same. So he wanted to renew the faith of Christians, and he's known as the father of existentialism.
Okay, right. So he was constantly asking himself, why am I here? Did God put me here? And for what purpose?
Yeah, he's also known for rebranding all the biblical figures to kind of match the modern times. So he kind of tried to make them even more relevant to the public. But not really, because we'll get there.
Okay.
He said he wanted to, but then his philosophy is like, all right, guy. He was not a traveled philosopher. He was just chill in his flat in Copenhagen. He did travel a bit, but he was just mainly, if anything, he would go and start up conversations with strangers on the street when he would just walk. So his personal life, because of his father and fiancé, his personal life affected his work quite a bit. Like, it would come through his work. He wanted the previous philosophers to be, I think he wanted them to be seen not separate from his work, from their work. Because a lot of times he said that philosophers would preach the complete opposite of what their life actually looks like.
Oh.
So he was like, don't separate the two.
I don't know if I agree with that.
No, because I'm like, do what the preacher says, not what the preacher does. It's like a very well-known...
And it's also, you are allowed to come up with good ideas and not respect them.
Yeah, apply them to your life.
But that's based on human nature, which is fine, I guess, in a way.
It's kind
It
of
is hypocritical.
Yeah.
It is.
I mean, if you're aware that you're hypocritical, then okay, but that doesn't really hold your case much. You know, like if you're trying to preach me something that you're not even applying to yourself, how do you expect me to follow you and apply that if you yourself are not? It just sounds like diagenetics. Anyways.
You want to give that another take?
No. It's fine if people don't understand what I'm saying and referring to. Okay, so going back to his religious points, he mainly wanted to prove to people, so he didn't want to make religion easy for people to understand. He didn't want to make it as accessible. I don't know if that's the right word. He basically just wanted to make people realize that the distance between the frail humans is very immense to God. So God is unreachable. That's how big of a deity he is.
Oh, brother.
That you need to, like, God is the only one that could save your life.
Okay.
So he wanted to make people realize that by the simple fact of just thinking about how people can sin, and that God doesn't sin, and he's the only one that could forgive people's sins and wash them off of their sins. And he wanted to make people realize that through this fact that he's the only one able to make us without sin and good, to make us realize that he's that good. that he's that big of a, he's God, but like, yeah, you say, God, but he kind of wanted to make people understand that it's much more than that.
But how is this philosophy? It sounds like a very intense preacher.
He was very religious. I think maybe he used methods of philosophy to explain this type of religious thing.
Oh God. You have anything else? This guy sounds very boring.
He thought about the notions of good and evil. And that, again, going back to morals, that was a big thing with philosophers, wasn't it? Let's take the case of murder. Only God can say if that murder was good or evil. So our socially accepted morals don't really matter if God decides something else, basically.
Huh? Then how the fuck do I know I'm doing the right thing? He just told me, oh, it doesn't matter. You have your morals, but, well, you might be wrong, you dick.
Yeah, there was an example I didn't really get into. Maybe you know anything about Abraham?
I remember, this was fucking bullshit. God gave him a son, right? And then God was like, well, you know that son that I gave you? It would be a shame if something would happen to him. So he makes Abraham, he asks him to take him to whatever place where he has to sacrifice Isaac, his son. And it would be sort of, this is how you prove your loyalty and belief in me.
So through this Abraham story,
right?
Because God makes him basically murder his son, right?
Well, I don't think he does murder him. Wait, give me a second.
He doesn't.
He doesn't kill his son. He was really ready to fucking murder that kid, but he didn't do it because the angel came and said, yo, homie, we were just kidding.
Through the Abraham story,
right,
Kierkegaard,
that guy,
he basically wants to prove that would, socially, it would be considered very immoral, right? To kill your own son.
Right.
But because God asked you to, then any social norms are thrown out of the window.
I see. Even
though he didn't in the end, it was just a test. Oh my God, why does God sound like a girlfriend? Like a psychotic, possessive girlfriend in this thing? Why? Do you understand?
I think so, but I hate it.
Yeah. And again, it's like, oh, have you got morals? Well, check them out the window because they don't matter in this philosophy.
If God doesn't feel like they matter today, then they don't.
So it was funny because he's like being religious. So he's trying to convince me to believe what he believes. Yeah. But then he's proving the same point as Nietzsche. And
yeah, nothing matters.
And he literally said God is dead. So I'm like, what are you trying to prove?
Well,
I personally just find these theories interesting to read about. And the only thing I can think of is people had so much time on their hands to just read and study and come up with these ideas that I could never. How do you not get mentally exhausted? Nietzsche he got really bad in the end.
Oh, well, then that's your answer. That's why he had such a hard time. He had issues.
Yeah, but what about these other two guys?
The Danish guy seemed like he had a blast. He was like, well, fuck, nothing matters. God decides.
Basically, yeah. I just like reading about it. Because I'm like, they just lived in a completely different reality. Just the fact that every day I just realize it hits me and I look at people on the street. It's kind of like usually you don't care. You're like, yeah, I'm living my life and these are just items moving around me, right? But then you just look at them and it's like everyone has their own life and everyone has their own reality and they think their reality is the correct one. Everyone. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes I think that and I'm like, no, that's a bit too much thinking for me today. Just take a break.
I think I do, though I don't agree with the concept of, oh, they have a different reality. They do have their own lives.
Yeah.
And I think that's what trips me out sometimes as well.
Yeah.
Because I look at people and I realize like that, oh, I had to eat my breakfast and brush my teeth and have 3 mental breakdowns today.
Oh no.
They probably had to do something similar. which is very interesting. It's interesting because you experience life just from your own point of view.
Yeah.
And you can absolutely use empathy to understand other people, but your understanding can only go
So far.
so far.
Yeah, because I'm like, I have all these issues that I deal with in my life, and then I'm thinking everyone has issues. So then I'm like, at that point I just start panicking, and I'm like, I don't want to deal with everyone else's issues. Why am I thinking about this? That's why I would never be a philosopher. So go insane.
Really, I think I personally find it quite humbling. It puts things in perspective.
It does, but at the same time, it's not solving my issues.
Well, no, but
It's the it could be worse thing.
I know I find comfort to know that I'm not alone in my pain, that other people experience it as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, let's say that there was just one person that in the world that was blind, kind of like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's just sometimes it's a lot.
I do find it sort of scary to be too long with my own thoughts.
Yes, that's why we have TikTok. Yeah, I don't like being alone with my own thoughts for more than 5 minutes. It's a long time. A long time. I just don't do it.
It's interesting though, because it's not just, a big part of it is observing. You have to look at the world outside of you to come up with the answers to certain questions that you might ask yourself. So I don't think it's just, I sit in my office with the doors and the windows closed and I just think about, why am I here?
Obviously,
What is
you have
my
to
purpose?
Obviously, you have to read other people's experiences and thoughts to come up with your own.
I think I would like it.
To be a philosopher?
I do think, yes, but because I do like the study part of it, the research, reading about what people, sort of how do they come up with all these ideas,
Yeah,
even
I
if
like
you
that.
don't agree with any of them.
That's why I just love reading about like all the different views about this well-known worldwide subject of religion is everywhere. I just love knowing what other people think about it and their philosophies on it. Because even though, let's say, there's a lot of people being that are Christian, every interpretation of that could be different depending on who you're asking.
I agree.
I've really actually enjoyed doing the study for this.
Oh, I'm glad. I like it a lot. Maybe we can also mention that this is a very broad subject.
Yes.
And we discussed 6 guys, and maybe we can come back to the subject one day to talk about some other guys. Because also the term weird is very subjective. They were unusual based on
the norms back then.
That too, but also what we personally thought meant unusual.
Yeah, it's very subjective.
So maybe the listeners can suggest some other guys we can discuss. Okay, thank you. Bye.